Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Canham, and this is my presentation on the Boston National Historical Park, better referred to as the Boston NHP. To start off with, what is the Boston NHP? The Boston NHP consists of 7 historical parks: Faneuil Hall, the Paul Revere House, the Old South Meeting House, the Old State House, the Old North Church, the Bunker Hill Monument and Museum, and lastly, the Charleston Navy Yard, which also includes the USS Cass and Young and the USS Constitution. On the right, you can see the park map provided through the NPS, and this shows where all the sites are, but also has the Freedom Trail, which is the red that has other sites in Boston that are also historically important. But you can follow those in person and take the tour and see all these amazing sites in person. Um, the Boston NHP tells 2 stories. First, it tells the importance of Boston in the Revolutionary War for independence, and second, the efforts of the Charleston Navy Yard to defend America during the wars. Um, However, before we dive deeper into that, I want to travel back in the day, as Boston in early American history was a bustling seaport of about 16,000 people, largely populated by Puritan settlers from England. Early Bostonians played a leading role in conflict with the mother country that eventually led to the American War of Independence. This was over their daily trade activities that they were majorly involved in, and this was a major part of their economy because they were on a port. They would trade a lot, and it majorly influenced them now and still does today. Some historical context for you: most of the Boston NHP is dedicated to the colonial history of the United States from 1761 to 1775. This is the prelude years of the American War of Independence. It also talks about the Boston NHP as the birthplace of the Navy, as the Charleston Navy Yard from 1800 to 1974 was very crucial, especially during wartime years of the Civil War, World War One, and World War Two. Uh, During this big timeline, some other major events occurred and showed what was happening in the nation around the world. Some national events that occurred from 1761 to 1776 and also 1800 to 1974 were the publication of the famous book Common Sense by Thomas Paine in 1776, the invention of the phonograph in 1877, the Great Depression in the 1930s, the rise of stars like Elvis Presley in 1950s, and the first ever Super Bowl in 1967. Some international events that occurred during this timeline were things like Beethoven's birth in 1770, the Industrial Revolution era, which was in the 1800s, the Napoleonic Wars from 1803 to 1815, the space race in the 1950s, and the Holocaust in 1941 to 1945. I hope these events can set a timeline of how much happened during the time of these sites being active and important until the park was established in 1974. The song playing right now is named Chester and was deemed the American Revolutionary song composed by William Billings. As I mentioned earlier, much of the park revolves around the American Revolutionary War and leading up to it. One of the more important sites at the Boston HP is the Bunker Hill Monument. The Battle of Bunker Hill was a very significant battle in the beginning of the Revolutionary War. This was one of the first battles that was a turning point of a potential victory for the Americans. Although they lost the battle, the morale boost and patriotism flowed through the country as they withstood the massive army ahead. On the right, you can see my first primary source. This is the view of Bunker Hill Monument, which was built in 1824 to 1843, and this is one of the pictures that was taken or drawn, I guess, when this was made. On the right, these stats show the bravery and willpower of the American Army during the Battle of Bunker Hill and how they took on a large army and caused more damage. These soldiers are why the monument exists, as they were so historically important in the outcome of the World War and America. As you can see, the Americans only had 2,400 soldiers compared to the British 3,000, and they had significantly less casualties, more than half. Um, British walked out with 1,000 casualties, and this just influenced and inspired many Americans to keep fighting for this war and that they had a chance. Paul Revere, the famous American hero, has his almost completely original house included as one of the historical sites in the Boston NHP. His role as a messenger, specifically when telling the colonies that the British were coming to attack them, historically changed the outcome of the war. In this picture, you can see the famous picture of him riding into town on his horse, telling them that the British were coming. The Charleston Navy Yard is one of the most important sites at the Boston NHP, as it represents the start of the Navy in America. This yard was historically important in fueling and providing equipment for the wars and creating a sustainable and powerful Navy. The Naval Yard, although very historically important, impacted the economy dramatically as it brought many jobs and money flow into this area. The data on the right shows how many employees the yard hired and how much they were paying everyone. This clearly shows the influence the yard had on the economy, as they were a major provider. As you can see in the graphic that I made from the information from my primary source number 3, which was a PDF about the Charleston Navy Yard, it shows that in 1943 they had about 50,000 workers. This was a massive yard and provided a ton of jobs for the locals. In this payroll, it was estimated that there was about $144 million in payroll. This was significant and huge in this area at this time, as this was millions of dollars that was being pumped into the economy and was helping it thrive. This is only one example of the economic significance of the sites of the Boston NHP, as multiple of these sites have influenced the economy in many other ways, such as trade, as I mentioned earlier. The two ships that are still working and owned by the Boston NHP are the USS Constitution and the USS Canham, and they are examples of ships used in the wars. These ships demonstrate the work that the Navy Yard did and how impactful they were to history in fighting and winning world wars. The one on the top is the USS Constitution, as it was made in 1875. As you can see, it was just bare bones and wood in this picture, but it's just a major timeline, as the bottom picture is the USS Canham, which was in 1958. They produced so many ships, and they were so historically important through many years. Here's a video. It's about a 20-minute video, in-depth interview by Pinyu Chen talking about the USS Canham and its impact on society in the past and still in the present. It is super insightful and provides a lot of great information about this, as it goes through and takes a tour and shows off the USS Canham at the Boston NHP. This next portion is about the socio-economic situations in today's society and back then. The stories told of the Boston NHP are not only about the political foundation of the United States, but also the country's economic foundation. The role of trade in the American economy is as vital today as it was in the 1760s, when trade was part of the conflict with Great Britain. Bostonians were early advocates of open trade. Open trade still has strong advocates in America's current economy. America's leadership in the world is partly based on its gross domestic product, the largest in the world. The U.S. Navy, with its Navy yards like the Charleston Navy Yard, has always protected America's interest, which includes protecting trading routes across the world's oceans. This is something that impacts thousands of people, as they protect the trade routes that we are so known for and that we strive to protect, so that we can keep our economy just running and viable. So why is the Boston NHP important? Every generation of Americans must learn what kind of country the United States has been, what it is now, and what Americans aspire to be. Americans should know how their country came into being, what role it has played in the world, and what role the U.S. should play in the future. This can only be done by looking into our country's past. The stories told at the Boston NHP helps Americans investigate their past as a guide of what Americans might do in the future. Here are my works cited. and I really appreciate you taking the time and watching my presentation on the coolest national park, the Boston NHP. None of this would have been possible without these amazing sites and sources. I hope you can take some time and watch them. And also, I give a big thank you to Bill Paro, who very much helped me with the questions and was an amazing park ranger to work with. Thank you so much for viewing. Hope you enjoyed.